Hey guys, Jamie here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Crimson Education and a Harvard and Stanford graduate. Thanks for filling out your interest in accessing our exclusive US News partner webinar content. In this webinar, you're going to be getting some great insights into college admissions strategies that will help you get into the best universities in the world. US News is one of our most important partners, and as the world leader in college admissions guidance here at Crimson, after you finish watching this webinar, reach out to Crimson so we can design a personalized program for you and help you figure out how you can get into these awesome universities. Check out the webinar, and I'll see you soon.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We're talking today exclusively to all of our lovely audience from US News and World Report. And we would love to talk to you about universities and admissions in the US and the UK, some of the two most popular places in the world. Today, we're going to cover basically talking about admissions in both of those two places and what differences look like. We're going to talk about how to prepare, what admission officers look for, what your profile needs to look like, what does it take to stand out, and then also the importance of starting early. So we're going to cover all of that in a bit. I also wanted to quickly tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Bilal. I'm going to be one of your co-hosts for today, and I'm an academic advisor at Crimson Education. I've been with Crimson for 3 years, and I graduated from UT Austin. I studied linguistics, so I love languages. I speak more languages myself, and my background and my ethnicity in my culture, you're always supposed to go for STEM and medicine and all these amazing majors. But I was the rebel in my family. I was like, nope, I'm sticking to languages. I love languages. And for some reason, I thought if I get a linguistics degree, I'll learn a sixth language, just magically. But that didn't work out for me. I still love what I do. I worked as a teacher for a very long time. And currently, I'm at Crimson, and I help students with admissions and developing their best path. I'll hand it over to Jamie, our other co-host.
Fantastic. Now, I grew up actually as an international student in New Zealand. You could probably hear from my funny accent. Going through school up until the age of 14, I thought I wanted to do medicine within a local New Zealand university, like the University of Auckland. Quite luckily, I bumped into this guy on the train called Ben Kornfeld, and he actually had just gotten into Yale. He was an American citizen, and he told me, Jamie, you should think about overseas universities. So I spent the next 4 years building my candidacy for these top universities, doing all the kind of different things we're going to talk about today: academics, extracurriculars, leadership. I did some funky things like taking 10 A levels. Then I applied to a whole range of top universities and got into schools like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, Columbia, the Huntsman program, which is at Wharton Business School at UPenn, as well as Cambridge University. I ended up going to Harvard, where I did my undergrad and master's degree in applied math. And I actually used advanced standing to finish my degree 2 years ahead of schedule, which was pretty cool. Following that, I made the slightly quirky decision to apply to business school at Stanford, actually quite young. So I went over to Stanford Business School for my MBA, and also I did an education master's degree there as well. Following that, I went to Oxford on the Rhodes Scholarship to pursue a DPhil in public policy. So I've really seen some of these top institutions up close and personal. And over the last 8 years at Crimson, have been really fortunate to help guide many ambitious students from all over the world into these top universities.
And no biggie, Jamie is very humble. No biggie, he's just the CEO and the co-founder of the company. If you forgot to mention that. Very modest and humble person, Jamie. Always love working with you. Alrighty, so let me quickly talk about our mission at Crimson and what we believe in. So our mission is to make sure that we compete on the world stage, and we make sure that our students reach their greatest potential. To boil it into like 2 words, we say, or 3 words, I would say, we want to help you unlock the full potential. So every student that comes to us, no matter what grade, whether they're in high school or in their college, postgrad, whatever, right? We want to make sure that we help them unlock their full potential and go for something that's higher and reach their full potential. And that's through a very wide range of educational services and our personalized training team. So when it comes to our background as a company, next slide, please, Jamie. When it comes to a little bit about our different interactions, and like I said, Jamie is very, very humble, but we have been included in so many different articles in so many different places. Here's an interview of Jamie with Bloomberg about college admissions process. We've been featured in New York Times and so on. But most importantly for our audience, we are the official partner with US News. And you'll see that in the next slide. So US News and World Report has announced a strategic relationship with Crimson, where we're basically one of their partners when it comes to college counseling. And what this amazing relationship, what it allows us to do is that so many students, when they look at top universities in the world, they use Compass from US News and World Report. They go there and they look at what is the best university in linguistics, for example, for me. Where should I go? Which one fits my needs? And US News creates these different lists of what is top. We actually advocate for that too. We want to help you get to these universities because sometimes you might fit in the top 30, but we want to help you go to the top 20 or even better. So that's where this strategic relationship really blossoms. Some of the big things that we would encourage to say why you should work with Crimson. Here are some 4 reasons that we believe in. So our approach is very holistic. We're one of the only college counseling places that can help you from start to finish. So we actually help you plan, but we actually help you execute as well. That's something that a lot of college counseling companies don't have. So a college counselor is always there, but the execution is missing, or vice versa. So we combine it all in a holistic approach. We have research, we have guaranteed internships, you name it. And by the way, we're also fully registered online high school. Our expertise, we have brilliant minds, amazing people that work at Crimson. Our global presence. So the global presence, basically for me, my takeaway on that is that we have this bird's eye view of the admissions process all over the world. So we know what students from, for example, from Egypt applying to US universities typically look like and how you should set up yourself apart from the rest of the competition. That's a random example, but I'm trying to tell you that we see things from a very elevated vantage point. Our results, so our students are 4 times more likely to get into any of their dream schools. And one of the great things about our results is that we don't keep track of our results ourselves. We hire an external company to keep track of our results and they audit us. So it's very hard for a company that uses an external company to inflate their numbers. When we say we're 4 times more likely to get you in, other companies actually do the tracking for us, which is amazing. Alrighty, so let's go to our topic for today. So I wanted to quickly introduce you guys to the US university admissions landscape, and then I'll hand it over to James to tell you about the UK. So for the US, here are some of the leading US colleges that are very well known. And if you use the US News Compass and look at top universities, you'll see similar names here. So Princeton University, Harvard, you name it, those types of universities. A lot of you have probably heard of like UCLA as well. It's a very large public university in the US, but these are some of the most popular ones. Now let's look at some categories of US universities. So in the US, next slide please, Jamie. Sorry, I think it's a bit of a delay on my end, I apologize. So types of US universities in basically the different types of categories in the US. So we do have the Ivy League that everyone knows about, and a very big misconception that we always hear, people thinking that MIT or Stanford is part of the Ivy League. Is not. They're just top universities, and Ivy Leagues just happen to be top universities, so people just bucket them together. But the Ivy League is very separate. There's only these schools, so from Princeton all the way to Cornell. Other private colleges that are also top, they could even be sometimes in specific majors even better than Ivy League schools. You have MIT that is very well known, U Chicago, Stanford, Duke, Johns Hopkins, etc. Harvey, shout out to Harvey Mudd, which I live about 20 minutes away from. I always go to their campus. All right, so public colleges, they're known to be very large. And large universities have their pros and cons, just like private colleges, pros and cons to both. These are the types of things that we always love to teach our students about and educate them about to find that best fit. Because, hey, I probably would be honored to go to MIT, but maybe if I go to MIT, I won't be as happy as going to a more liberal arts type of college that's smaller. So you need to find that best fit. But going back to public colleges, like I said, they're very large. The teacher to student ratio is very big as well. And that means it allows great room for networking. So especially for majors like entrepreneurship and businesses. Liberal arts colleges are amazing. A lot of people downplay these schools when they're some of the best schools in the country. Liberal arts colleges, what they have in common is that the classroom or the class size is so small. So that allows for that first name basis type of interaction. Excuse me. So the first name basis type of interaction with your professor. The professor would be calling you Jamie, Bilal, instead of, oh, student in the back, right? So it's that type of a place where you can actually collaborate and work on research type of things. So those are some of the types, the 4 buckets of universities in the US. Now, handing it over to Jamie to tell us more about the UK landscape.
Fantastic. Great insights from Bilal. He's a real master of the game, and he knows a lot about these leading universities. So thanks for those insights. Now we'll take a deep dive into the UK university landscape, which is actually really popular around the world. We often see our ambitious Crimson kids applying to both the US and the UK. That's what I did back in the day. I applied to schools like Cambridge and Imperial College London, other schools in the UK, as well as a variety of other top US universities too. Here you actually have a photo of Oriel College, which is one of the Oxbridge colleges. And actually, Oxbridge, as a fun fact, is a combination of the words Oxford and Cambridge, and refers to sort of these two top institutions. So normally there's 5 top UK universities. The exact ranking varies a bit based on the subject. University of Oxford, University of Cambridge, Imperial College London, UCL, and LSE. We've fortunately sent significant numbers of students to all of these schools. We've got a really close insight into each of them and where their strengths are. I think of one of my earliest students, Christine, who's now a graduate of LSE Law, and many of our students who are currently learning on these campuses today. Now, as far as these different tiers of schools, Oxbridge founded in 1096 and 1209 respectively. So these are some of the oldest universities in the entire world. And they have these long established traditions, a lot of heritage to them. There's a college system, which actually a lot of top US schools were modeled after, like Harvard and Yale, copying the kind of Oxbridge system. There's also a tutorial system, which means you learn typically one-on-one with your professor for certain subjects, which obviously is a pretty high intensity experience. There's nowhere to hide. The Russell Group refers to broadly the top 24 or so top institutions in the UK. The group was established 1 year before I was born in 1994, and it really refers to many of these leading schools that many of our students around the world will be kind of seriously considering. There's of course some wider UK schools, and in certain areas like the arts or fashion, there are other institutions that are really worth thinking about, as well as say performance music too. These are all quite interesting, like the music conservatoires or the drama schools, the visual arts programs around the world. Now, there's lots of nuance to the UK. For example, recently Cambridge opened a foundational year program for those from underprivileged backgrounds, which you can pursue for a year before seeking entry into Cambridge. So there is a lot more nuance in this, but at a high level, this kind of gives you the flavor. Now, I'll now give you a sense of the main differences between the top UK and US universities. And you might recognize these different photos. On the left, you have the Empire State Building, if I'm not incorrect, from New York. And on the right, you have a well-known bridge in London. So these are two of the main hubs, the meccas students are heading towards. Generally speaking, the US is a 4-year undergraduate degree, whether the UK is typically 3 years and sometimes 4 years. When you apply for the US, most students will use the common application process, but there are other types of applications like the coalition application or the UC or MIT specific application systems. In the UK, you apply through the UCAS, which is the universal application system, and you can apply to 5 schools maximum. But in the US, you can apply to really as many as you want. The US focuses on holistic admission across extracurriculars, academics, and leadership skills, whether the UK is very focused on academics and academics alone for most students. Here you see 2 pie charts, which kind of gives you a summary of the weighting of different characteristics. The US is about 40% academics, 30% extracurriculars, and 30% essays and interviews. That varies based on the exact ranking of the school. If you apply to a place like Stanford, you can't get in without top academics, but you also can't get in with academics alone usually. And so the weightings do move around a bit, but this is a bit of an average for you. The UK is more 75% or higher academics with 15% extracurriculars, but these extracurriculars must be tied to what you're applying for academically to be kind of really worthy and considered. And then finally, your essays and interviews, which is about 10%. Bear in mind for Oxford and Cambridge, the interview can be even more important, which is pretty cool. So what are these top universities looking for? Generally speaking, the US universities are looking for leadership, both leadership roles like student government, as well as creating your own initiatives, which we help a lot with at Crimson through our leadership mentoring service. Intellectual curiosity, showing you can take extra classes outside of school, which many of our students do through our Crimson Global Academy, where they take extra APs, A-levels. You can do things like Coursera classes, edX classes, etc. Creativity and initiative, which are often shown through extracurriculars as well. And then finally, your personal qualities. And these personal qualities basically are characteristics you can show through the essays you write for these universities. It actually only a couple of days ago, we had the US early action deadline. So I was up quite late with some of my students for the November 1st milestone before they submit their applications around the place. And a lot of those applications do require a lot of fun essays, which I really enjoy mentoring our students through at Crimson. So there's lots of different considerations when you think about, college fit. You've got to find a degree that actually, matches your interests. So like, for example, if you don't love finance, but you find yourself at the Wharton Business School, you're going to have a pretty tough time. You want to think about making sure that what you actually do in high school prepares you rigorously to succeed when you get to university. In my case, doing further maths A-level was pretty critical for me being able to really compete effectively in my applied math economics degree at Harvard, because a lot of students in my class were pretty mathematically gifted. And so if I hadn't taken that rigorous coursework in high school, I might have found myself in some proverbial hot water. So make sure that you kind of sync that up, and we can, of course, guide you through that through our mentors at Crimson. Then financial fit, obviously, you've got to be able to afford this. And many of these institutions do have great financial aid on offer. So we can, of course, recommend you what programs, what scholarships, what pathways could make this feasible for you. A significant portion of Crimson students do apply for financial aid around the world. How you live on campus, it's worth noting that a lot of these top US universities have 99% on-campus living rates. So essentially, virtually all students live on campus all 4 years, which is why you form such a deep bond with your classmates, because you really live with them, you go to school with them, it's pretty intense. And then finally, what extracurriculars are available too, and whether they really resonate with you. I, for example, was very impressed by the Harvard Student Agencies, which is the largest student-run business in America. And it basically gives you an opportunity to run things like retail stores, etc., online e-commerce stores as an undergraduate student, and get some business experience you wouldn't normally have in college. So with these three pillars, first of all, academics. Often, of course, they're looking at your high school grades. They're looking at, are you taking a rigorous curriculum? So things like the A-levels, things like the advanced placement exams are well regarded, as well as things like the International Baccalaureate. Standardized testing, taking things like the SAT or the ACT, even though it's optional, it's still heavily encouraged, or UK-specific tests like the Thinking Skills Assessment, which I took for Cambridge Economics. Next up, you have the extracurriculars and leadership, where you're really assessed based on impact, how many students you're impacting, how cool and creative were your initiatives, were you a bit of a self-starter? I was speaking to one of the directors of one of America's major scholarships this week, and he emphasized his desire to find entrepreneurs, people that were going to come on campus and build things in the future as well. This is one of the categories you use to show that ability. And then finally, your personal qualities, because these universities in the US do look at you holistically. The UK is a bit more objective and focused on your academic ability, but the US, they do want to see, your personality, what you've done in your community, how you identify, your ethnic background, family dynamics you've experienced. All of these things do fit into the process. Now, on the US academic side, they often want to see your trajectory. Are you getting better over time or worse over time? Have you had some performance in a certain subject that's a bit bizarre? Like, for example, you did very badly in math, but everything else you were doing well in. How are your grades going? What's your weighted and unweighted GPA? How does that compare to your classmates? Compared to what your school offers, how rigorous is your curriculum? How many subjects are you taking compared to other students? What are your grades in them? Are you taking the most challenging courses in things like math? Or are you taking easier subjects? And then finally, your standardized testing. These are important because they're a way for the university to benchmark you across the world, particularly important as an international student, because they're not going to be as familiar with your high school program. Bear in mind that 4 years of your academic achievements for a US university will be read in minutes by these admissions officers. So you really have to make an impact quickly, and your brand and identity that you show these schools will play a big role. So extracurriculars, of course, although they aren't as objective as academics, they play a very big role in showing that you actually can compete in different competitions, create your own initiatives and programs, and alongside strong academics and testing, help to round out your candidacy. So we've had Crimson kids getting patents, we've had Crimson kids launching apps, raising tens of thousands of dollars in online fundraising projects, kicking off viral change.org campaigns. And our job is to actually help find your interests, ideate a project with you, then help you execute that and get that to scale. And that's a really good way to build your candidacy for these universities, and also some wonderful life skills along the way as well. So how do you think about leadership roles? Crimson, we've really coined two types of leadership. The first is institutional leadership. And this includes actually being selected for existing leadership roles within the school, being the head girl, the head boy, the school captain, the captain of a sports team, these traditional roles you think of when you hear leadership. The second category is innovative leadership, where basically you are launching your own initiative, whether it be a startup organization, whether it be a new club, whether it be launching an app. And if you want to hear more detail about this, of course, you can have a meeting with our team. We can speak to you in more detail. And also in our new book, Accepted, coming out in February 2022, there's a whole chapter deep dive into leadership and exactly what this means for you. Now, personal qualities. The universities, of course, want to understand who you are, and they particularly want to select for certain characteristics they think are quite successful. The first is self-awareness. They don't mind if the student's struggling in a certain area sometimes, as long as they're self-aware. Arrogance is a really bad trait when applying to these universities, so it's important you do show that willingness to grow and improve and really augment your skills as you get into these new environments. Showing you can actually overcome barriers, that you have grit and resilience and things don't knock you over. You also have kindness and sincerity for building the community around you. And you have a genuine service orientation. So you feel for those more vulnerable than yourself. These are all personal qualities that really are cherished in the process. You also want to cultivate a strong personal brand. So for example, take my student who recently got into Stanford. She built up a profile around environmental science. And she was able to create different research projects to do with environmental science with professors, do some papers and stuff. She was able to write essays that spoke to how to combat some of the climate change issues the world is facing. And then she even launched things like Clean Earth Days in her school environment. So when you read her application, it was clear that she really spoke to those environmental science values. That personal brand helps you to pop off the page for these admissions officers, and actually helps you to compensate for lower grades or actually, amplify your candidacy because of that coherent narrative, because the university can really see what you're going to go and achieve and what you've been passionate about in your high school years. That doesn't mean you've got to continue those passions in in college, but it does mean you've actually stood for some really important things throughout high school and you've got that coherency to you. So intellectual curiosity, as I mentioned before, is really important. What you do to showcase your academic interests. In high school, I took A-level economics and a bunch of other subjects outside of school, and that helped to show Harvard and other institutions that I really was passionate about learning, not just for grade's sake, but because I found the content quite fascinating. Also your personal background, so they can actually compensate for things like disadvantage in your background in the admissions process. Some of my students who come from disadvantaged backgrounds, will often have to overcome much more challenge in their high school process to get the same grades as somebody else. And so the US is very aware of this, as well as the UK now too. And that actually helps you in the process if you can articulate some of those historical challenges that you have indeed overcome. Now, the personal statement that you write has to be pretty focused, when you apply for these schools. Now, you basically want to focus on a story or a journey or an experience that impacted who you are. To be very specific about this, I wrote my essay about working at a Porto, a chicken burger shop in New Zealand, my first time at a part-time work experience, and I really sucked at it, to be honest. I was terrible. I burnt the burgers. I got told off by my boss, and I really wasn't a very good employee. I wasn't learning very quickly, and the experience was quite humbling because you kind of think fast food work, how hard can that be? But I was just really quite bad at it. And so this was a really interesting self-reflection essay and kind of a self-deprecating, quite funny essay. You can actually find it online if you search Jamie Common Application Essay Ivy League or something like this. You'll be able to get it online, featured in Business Insider, to give you a sense of quite a funny essay and to show you an example of this on a website. Now, we help you to brainstorm what topics could be relevant. Many students don't quite appreciate that some of the experiences they've had are actually very unique and novel. Of course, things you experience, you think maybe everyone's gone through, but often there are specific things in your background we can draw out as your college advisor and help you suggest different topics that are quite powerful. So this is a really, really good way for you to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. So do think about that as well. Now, for some red flags, you don't want to be overly dramatic and you don't want to kind of exaggerate anything about your adversity you've faced. That sincerity and empathy is important, It's not a race to show who's had more adversity. It's more about the learning experience you've taken. And so that authentic story is definitely quite important. You want to be, careful to avoid red flag topics. A classic one would be almost losing a final, then winning it in a sports match. Pretty boring stuff. Or, the experience you faced moving from China to Australia. Lots of kids experience that as well, for example, applying to these schools. So you want to think about some of these common topics, which we can advise you on and avoid them. So how do you start preparing now? This is really the application timeline. Now, bear in mind that Crimson students are 4 times more likely on average to get into these top universities, but the students who begin even earlier have a bigger advantage. And it's not rocket science why. The earlier you begin with us, the more we can advise you on different academic subjects. I had tutors in 7 different subjects in high school. The more tutoring you have, guidance, clarity, we can help you into better summer programs. We can help you launch more capstone projects. We can help you build up your brand in high school to get more leadership roles. We can help you manage your time better, your stress better. We can help introduce you to cool global opportunities you might not be aware of. So the earlier you start, the better. But basically in grade 8 to 10, we will usually advise you on different academic subjects you should be thinking about and taking, exploring different fields you probably haven't tried yet, as well as figuring out what extracurriculars you might be good at, giving you different competitions you can test out to figure out where your strengths lie to help start building that profile. In grade 10 or 11, we'll usually be nailing the standardized tests, training you for them through our SAT tutoring or ACT tutoring program or other kinds of tutoring services for things like your IGCSE or your national curriculums. And then we'll be helping you amplify some of those core activities. Many of my students are doing, competitive competitions like the John Locke essay competition or the Olympiads or, national economics competitions, things like this. You might then retake the SAT in grade 11, and then you'll be thinking about what schools to be applying for. As you go through Crimson, we give you a continual chart of what schools we think you can get into based on your current stats using our algorithms and data. So you've got a pretty live view of the set of schools we think you can be applying to, which is quite motivational because you kind of know where you stand. And then throughout your application year, grade 12, that's when you're writing the essays, working with your Crimson mentor on the topics, going back and forth on the language techniques and how you present yourself, getting feedback. That often can involve, 15, 20 drafts. It's quite extensive before you then apply. In that year, the UK applications are due as early as October for schools like Cambridge and Oxford. We just passed, for example, for this year, the early action deadline, but we'll help you figure out what schools to apply for in that critical deadline, whether you go binding or non-binding. And then, of course, you apply for the remaining schools in January. Between January and March, you will then, if you need to, send deferral letters to different universities, figure out any waitlist schools you've been on, send new updates to the universities, which we can help you on. And then, of course, we'll help you figure out which school to choose ultimately, which is the fun part after all these years of hard work. And then you can begin your first semester. So all very exciting stuff. Now, in summary, the US expects you to maintain a strong emphasis on extracurriculars from an early age. And so US students are usually much more well-rounded than UK students by the time they apply. But our students often are applying to both the US and UK, which means they're going to be building up that rich profile, but also building up the rigorous academics that can help get you into these top UK schools as well. Now, the UK mindset is much more focused on pure academics, and will often help you take, rigorous extension courses within the major you're applying for. So if you're applying for economics, that might involve A-level economics, A-level further maths, it might involve AP, macroeconomics. It could involve extension courses like university courses that we help you take, things like this. You often want to go above and beyond the traditional academics your school offers. Our global online high school, the Crimson Global Academy, can be used on a part-time basis to take extra subjects alongside your traditional high school. And many high achievers around the world are actually using that to boost their candidacy. As I said before, I took 10 A-levels. I took about 5 within my school and the rest outside of school using this augmented tutoring that I had been getting support from. You also can use us to do things like extra research with a professor through our network, through the Crimson Research Institute. Platforms like this to help you boost that intellectual vitality, and in doing so, boost your skills. This is a bit of a timeline for extracurriculars, essentially working through those throughout the course of high school, doubling down on activities that you are doing better. And then ultimately, you want to have 5 academic honors by the time you apply, which can include a combination of academics and top extracurriculars. One of my students who was just applying this weekend had, for example, a top in state in chess, as well as various mathematics awards that he had achieved over the course of high school. and then the #1 position in the academic decathlon, which is very popular in Australia and other parts of the world. Now, for the extracurriculars, you want to think about, for your projects, what problem are you actually solving? And for example, take the student who just applied to UPenn. He realized there was no computer science or artificial intelligence club at his school. So he launched an artificial intelligence club. And he defines success as training 30 kids in an online computer science course, guiding them through it so they could actually finish with some hard computer science skills. He did that. He sacrificed some of his, I guess, video gaming time to make time for this AI club project. And then now that he's leaving the high school, he's leaving the AI club behind to the new generation of leaders to keep going. And he recognized that he was actually putting himself out there. He was nervous the very first meeting. He had to present his club to 30 students that were wondering, what is this club? But he didn't mind, and failure wasn't really that costly to him. So he was happy to give it a go. We help you to go through these different milestones in your extracurricular journey. So now, how Crimson can actually support you. First of all, it's been a really exciting last 8 years at Crimson. Over this time, we're now widely regarded as the global leader in college admissions guidance, and US News ranks us as the world's leading college admissions guidance platform, as well as Times Higher Education. So you can be really assured you're with safe hands as we guide you through this process. We help you in our global university admissions counseling strategy, taking you from your international country all the way through high school and then into these elite universities. We guide you through extracurriculars and leadership, helping you figure out what you should do in these areas. Many of our students are initially confused, nervous, anxious about words like leadership. We help you to make that process more attainable and work you through those steps so you can really achieve and build out that profile. Essay writing and guidance, building your your essay writing skills, helping you improve your English abilities, and then having that translate into some powerful application essays that can help you get you into your top universities. And then finally, specialized tutoring. As I mentioned, I had tutors in 7 different subjects, and I was one of the, I was really the highest ranked student in my high school, but I used tutoring to get through 140 hours of A-levels in 30 or 40 hours so I could get through more subjects. So tutoring can be used as a competitive advantage to actually accelerate the timeline it takes you to learn these different subjects. With all this firepower behind you, equipping you to be the best version of yourself, Crimson's achieved some, pretty exciting results. Quite humbling, in fact, given how far we've come from our earliest days. We've sent now over 370 kids to the Ivy League, which is record breaking. More than 130 offers to Oxford and Cambridge, to all of these top competitive programs, like even Cambridge Medicine. You can Google our student Linda that recently got into Cambridge Medicine as an international student. Very hard to do. We've sent kids to the Columbia Juilliard dual degree program, combining the world's best music program with one of the world's best Ivy League skills. We've sent over 2,000 students to US top 50 universities, nearly 1,000 now to UK top 10 universities. And our students are systematically more likely to get into Oxford and Cambridge, which is pretty cool. Across both the US and the UK, you see that our students are substantially more likely to get in than applying by yourself. And so Crimson really gets hired by families because whatever you are as a student, we can make you a lot more effective, a lot better, and actually build some great skills within you so you can get into these elite universities and then live a career of meaning and impact. Now, our students as alumni have gone on to companies like Google, Goldman Sachs, McKinsey. They've won Rhodes Scholars. One of my students just raised several $1 million going through Y Combinator in Silicon Valley. Our students are really working for the world's leading companies today with fantastic salaries. And that shows you this powerful multi-year journey from where you are right now to these elite universities to these amazing careers. And we're really proud of that track record. So I guess—
Thank you so much, Jamie. I just wanted to interject here real quick. Sorry, I apologize. But thank you so much for all that great knowledge about both US and UK universities. I wanted to pause here real quick because I wanted to pick your brain with some of these most common questions that we get during our webinars. So for our audience, we do have weekly webinars aimed for specific countries at specific times. And typically our audience would ask us these 4 questions. These are the top questions that we almost always see. So I wanted to make sure that during this recording, we answer these live and have basically pick Jamie's brain through them. By the way, just a side note, the book that Jamie has mentioned that we're coming out with, it's actually, Jamie is the author of that book, and it's called Accepted. And in that book, you get like these deeper insights into what top universities look for in both the US and the UK. So I'm actually very excited to read that, Jamie.
Alrighty, so I wanted to tackle the number one first, or the number one question that we always get, which relates to COVID-19, the one on the right. It says, what does the future hold for university admissions rates and policies after COVID-19? Because we know, like, in the year of COVID, things were so unpredictable, and now things are going back to normal, but there are still lingering effects of COVID-19 on admissions. What are your thoughts on this?
It's a great question. So I guess the first thing is that COVID-19 has led to an explosion in online extracurricular activities. So for example, now we're seeing students across the world using our Crimson Global Academy to take extra A-levels or AP subjects above and beyond what their typical school had. Before COVID, online high school sounded kind of funky, but now it's pretty obvious. That's a really good way to be more efficient. Other things would be extracurriculars have become quite novel, like the Tiger Global Case Competition. This now has more than 3,000 applicants around the world each year. It's a global online business case competition where students compete all over the world in this activity. And then when you actually win or you do well in that competition, it's so well respected by these universities because it's got such scale and credibility now. So a lot of these online extracurriculars previously have opened doors for you as an international student, because if you didn't live in Silicon Valley or you didn't live in New York, maybe you couldn't compete in some of these top competitions. But now international students can do far more. And basically you've got more ability to compete on the world stage, which is very exciting. We're going to continue to see declining admissions rates year over year as more and more international students want to get into these top universities, because once you get in, the salaries you earn, the pathways are really quite attractive and the return on investment is very strong, particularly from STEM degrees. And so we're going to see probably continuously declining admissions rates. We should expect that the schools will continue to be test optional, but a lot of competitive students will still sit these tests. Back to you, Bilal.
That's a very good, interesting point you made that connects with the second most popular question that we get that you kind of just answered. We on the very left of the bubbles here, you guys see a question that says, with schools having gone test optional, should I still submit my scores and will it hurt my chances? And Jamie just said that with schools being test optional, a lot of top students are still going to take the test and submit them because it gives them that competitive edge. So the answer is absolutely, if you can, take the test. If there's a test center close to you and it works out for you, take it. The only time that you should take advantage of the test optional loophole is if you truly couldn't take the test, because the test center closed down in your city and now you have to travel to a different city or country to take it. And that's tough. And you don't have to force it that badly to go take the test. That's why they made it test optional, to accommodate for students that were impacted by COVID and were not able to take the test. But if you can take the test, you'll have that edge to do it. And then, Jamie, I wanted to tackle the question at the very top. When is it a very good time to start working on the college admissions process? You have answered this in the timeline previously, maybe 10 minutes ago. So for our audience, you can always go back and pause and read that timeline that Jamie showed us. But can you give us a quick summary, Jamie, of when is a good time to start working on the application?
So you basically want to begin this process when you're about 12 to 14, if you can. We see a lot of students that come to us a bit later when they're like, say, 15 or 16. And some come quite late when they're like 17 in the last application year. But the earlier you begin, the more obviously you can boost your shot. Think about this like going to the gym. The Rock doesn't become the Rock by, sort of jumping in before his next big movie 6 months before. He's been training for years and years and years to get where he is. Similarly for you, if you begin when you're 12 to 14, you're going to have a much better shot at these Ivy League schools. However, of course, it's better to start, now if you're say 15, 16, you're like only hearing about this pathway now. And many of our students do that and they still have great results. So I think in a nutshell, the earlier the better. Beginning of high school is advisable because the US does look at your last 4 years of high school. However, again, it is still possible. I think about kids like Duncan Parsons, one of our students that got into Harvard, Stanford, and won the Robertson Scholarship and only began with us 6 months before the application deadline. We've got many case examples like this, but in general, a lot of our Ivy League admits do come from students who've begun nice and early. So do be quite proactive about this and get started so you can actually build the most competitive profile possible.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jamie. So basically what you're saying, 12 to 14 years old, so that relates to most countries, that relates to 8th grade or 9th grade. Where you really want to start thinking about, okay, if I really want to go to some top universities in the world, I need to start thinking about that now. But also what I wanted to add to that, to our lovely audience, is that if you are in 10th grade or 11th grade, do not be discouraged. If you feel like, hey, you just suddenly discovered that you want to go to top universities and you feel like this overwhelming shadowing like lateness, don't be afraid. We get so many students that work with us that are in 10th grade or 11th grade. And I say work with us, but I mean generally getting help, right? Ideally, it would be great if you work with Crimson Education, but even if you're not getting college counseling and you are preparing for top universities and you're in 10th grade, it's not too late. It really depends on where you are on your own road to start building your profile. And we're here to help you. So we've helped so many students that are in 11th grade or even in 12th grade that eventually got to Ivy League, and they got help very, very late. But remember, that's an exception, right? Because the boost that they would get to their profile is maybe 10 to 15%. But if you work with us in 9th grade, the boost that you'd get to your profile is up to 100% or even 200%. So you double up on your efforts. That's the concept behind this. All right, the very last question that is the most common one that we always get is the one at the bottom that says, as an international student, what can I do to stand out in the eyes of US and UK admission officers? And Jamie has been kind to explain that to us throughout this webinar by explaining to us the different opportunities, the different things that you need to do through your academics and extracurriculars for both of those two places, for the US and the UK. So I highly encourage all of you to go back into this webinar and pause at certain slides and read them. But Jamie has already answered this question, and I think can you give us like a quick summary of this one, Jamie, of how do I stand out in front of admission officers?
Sure. Quick summary. First and foremost, challenges for academically to take the most rigorous classes in your high school, get very strong grades in them, go above and beyond outside of high school, take some extra subjects if you can, begin your extracurriculars when you're about 13 or 14, explore broadly, then find 3 to 4 core extracurriculars you can go quite deep in. For me, that was debating, Model UN, science, and theatre. And then work diligently on your personal statements so you can actually showcase quite unique parts of your personality and story, and then apply to a large number of schools, probably across both the US and UK. And if you can, do the standardized tests now that we're getting through the back of COVID. There are a couple of good ways to stand out in the college process, but of course, there's a lot more detail to go into, but that is a rapid fire outline for you, Bilal.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I appreciate that. Alrighty, thank you so much to our lovely audience for watching this. If you were able to hang out with us all the way until the end, you're a champion. We appreciate you. And please feel free to reach out to us at any point. We're more than happy to answer your questions and even offer a one-on-one free meeting where we can talk about your own profiles. We really look forward to working with all of you soon. Thank you.
Have a good one.